Discover what happens when she accidentally answers her boss's phone, revealing a hidden threat. It was an ordinary afternoon in the art studio as the vibrant colors and chaotic energy filled the air, but for Sarah, the rhythmic clanging of brushes clashed with the storm brewing inside her. Ms. Reynolds, always a force to be reckoned with, loomed over her desk, eyeing every move Sarah made as though her disapproval could turn her into mere canvas. Here she was, the diligent personal assistant, the unsung hero of creativity, yet feeling more like a shadow under the blinding lights of artistic brilliance. As she filed through invoices, a ringing phone jolted her. Her heart raced. On instinct, she answered, "Hello?" Instead of a casual greeting, she inadvertently tuned into a conversation that rattled her core. A corporate takeover was in the air, a threat lurking just beyond the vibrant walls of their creative domain. The implications? The studio's soul at risk, her job teetering on the edge, and the weight of her family's financial needs tugging at her like a relentless tide. Anxiety spiraled in her chest as she excused herself under the pretense of a scheduling conflict, slipping away to process this unsettling revelation amid the riot of brushes and colors. The echoes of Harold's wise words filled her mind as she paced in the break room, a man who could have easily turned cynical with the world's brush-off toward his once celebrated talent. To create is to face fear head-on, he often urged, a mantra buried in her subconscious. If only she could channel that spirit, just for a moment, but facing the reality of Ms. Reynolds' dismissals felt insurmountable. How could she, a mere assistant, convince her demanding mentor that shadows could be more than mere bystanders? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Gathering courage, Sarah restored her chaotic thoughts and returned to her desk, sifting through layers of paperwork that now felt like barriers rather than tasks. Her eyes darted to the door as if an escape could cancel the rising dread within. Would Ms. Reynolds listen? Would she even care about the potential devastation looming on their studio? Waves of uncertainty crashed over her, blending fear with a burgeoning determination. When she finally confronted Ms. Reynolds, evidence clutched tightly in her hands, doubt flickered. The evidence lay there on the table like an unwanted guest as Sarah's proposal surfaced. The air was thickened with an ominous tension, a mixture of accusation and desperation. But as she spoke, fingers trembling, Ms. Reynolds' dismissal was swift and cutting. The crushing realization settled in: her loyalty had not translated into respect but tethered her deeper into silence. As shadows began to darken the corners of the studio, Sarah found herself at a precipice. The possibility of losing her passion, a sacred place filled with creativity, rippled through her veins. Could she, the invisible artist, finally find the courage to shatter the silence? Or would fear render her just a supporting role in a play that was slipping away? The flickering light of hope hovered, yet the darkness crept closer. The stakes were impossibly high, and the haunting question remained: would she find her voice before it was too late? The studio buzzed with unfinished ideas and chaotic creativity, yet it felt like a cage to Sarah, each wall painted with the haze of her unfulfilled potential. Her confrontation with Ms. Reynolds had left her reeling. The dismissal had been swift and sharp, cutting deeper than any critique of her work ever had. It ignited something primal within her, a need not just to survive but to assert herself in a way that echoed the very essence of the studio's purpose. Hidden beneath layers of respect and obligation lay a fierce artist yearning for expression. That evening, in the solitude of her small apartment, desperation morphed into determination. The threat of the impending takeover haunted her, but rather than cower, she resolved to turn that fear into a catalyst for change. Fragments of ideas floated in her mind, haphazard sketches of a plan that could not only save her job but also redefine her place in the studio. She felt paralyzed between two worlds, the assistant glued to the whims of Ms. Reynolds and the artist bursting with ideas stifled by silence. As she contemplated her next move, she retrieved an old sketchbook from the shelf, its pages yellowing with time, filled with bold strokes and vibrant colors. Each line pulsed with her passion and her dreams, whispering back the courage she sought. The following day, Sarah entered the studio with a hard-earned sense of resolve. Inspired by her sketches and driven by her newfound mission, she poured herself into creating a presentation that showcased the studio's unique value, its artistic soul. She gathered facts about the industry's landscape, the trends, and the pivotal role their studio played within it. As the clock ticked toward her moment of truth, she made decisions that felt more like declarations. Instead of preparing to simply present to Ms. Reynolds, she envisioned it as a pitch to potential allies. Her pulse quickened, transforming the familiar flutter of anxiety into an electric wave of readiness. When the moment arrived, she stood taller than ever. Before Ms. Reynolds could even lean back with her usual disdain, Sarah placed her presentation on the table. "We need to talk about the future of this studio," she began, her voice steady and clear. The surprise in Ms. Reynolds' eyes was unexpected, yet the fleeting look of intrigue motivated Sarah to continue. With each slide, she unveiled the potential for innovation, ways to retain their unique identity while also adapting to changing artistic landscapes. The studio was more than just a collection of paintings, it was a movement toward authenticity, one that needed nurturing, not dismissal. As she spoke passionately, she saw the flicker of interest begin to cross Ms. Reynolds' features, a shift that sparked a little fire in her heart. But as Sarah navigated her pitch, an unsettling realization crept into the background. Though she was gaining traction in their conversation, the looming threat of the takeover still loomed, slick and insidious. Would her ideas be enough, or would they be used against her? As minutes ticked by, the atmosphere became a delicate dance, half bravery and half fear, teetering on the brink of revelation. Her professional future hung by a thread, swayed by both her courage in that room and the dark forces plotting their takeover just outside. Would Ms. Reynolds embrace the transition Sarah proposed, or would she dismiss it all in frail, protective instincts? The urge to break free from silence sparked traction in Sarah's mind, but she needed to brace herself. The battle for her artistic voice was only just beginning. In that critical moment, the phone rang again, this time shattering the budding hope in the air. What news would it carry? Would it signal a rallying point or a final blow? Sarah stared wide-eyed, the taste of resolve souring rapidly as she braced for whatever was to come. The phone rang insistently, shattering the precariously built momentum in the room. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, and her heart raced. Should she ignore it? The insistent vibration danced on her nerves, echoing the stakes of her presentation. In a split second, she made a decision. Channeling every ounce of strength gained from her earlier confrontation, she reached for the phone, the sharp plastic cool against her palm. "Hello?" She answered, conscious of Ms. Reynolds' piercing gaze drilling into her. "Ms. Reynolds? This is Douglas from the corporate office," a smooth voice replied, the authoritative tone laced with a hint of condescension. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Panic flickered beneath her calm facade. This was not just a casual call. "No, not at all. We were just discussing the future of the studio," Sarah said, every word an effort to inject strength into her faltering resolve. Douglas chuckled softly. "The future of the studio, or your future at the studio? It can be tough out there with the takeover looming, can't it?" The remark felt like a direct stab. She had hoped for an ally, but here was someone using her vulnerability against her. A well-timed wave of shame threatened to crash over her, but she fought it down. The studio has something unique to offer, something worth preserving. Her conviction surprised even herself. Perhaps. But that remains to be seen, doesn't it? We'll have our meeting soon, and we wouldn't want any unfounded ideas to jeopardize what we have planned, Douglas continued, deliberately vague yet menacing. Each word was an icy reminder of the precariousness of her position. As she hung up, the weight of the conversation settled heavily on her shoulders. Ms. Reynolds' expressions of doubt had turned from skepticism into something darker altogether. The threat now lay not just with Ms. Reynolds' initial dismissal but with looming corporate scrutiny that could cut her ambitions off at the knees. In that moment, the realization came crashing down: safety was an illusion. Countless ideas bubbled up as she contemplated her next move. She was no longer merely an assistant or an artist confined by another's vision but an advocate for the studio's very soul. But what if her newfound power became a target? Gritting her teeth, she began to strategize. She could keep building her presentation, reinforcing her vision of a more authentic studio, one that embraced innovation while honoring tradition. But she also needed to explore the dynamics of corporate influence creeping into their creative sanctuary. Perhaps there were other voices in the studio, other artists who shared her angst and vision. Sarah's focus shifted as ideas evolved. Envisioning a clandestine meeting with her colleagues, a brainstorming session, an artistic rebellion became paramount. Who else felt stifled? Whose creativity burned brightly, yet remained dimmed? Gathering her courage again, she ventured around the studio, catching glimpses of her fellow artists immersed in their worlds, but also sensing the same shadows of doubt and uncertainty that haunted her. Conversations shifted awkwardly when she approached, yet she pressed on. "We need to come together," she advised them, her voice breaking through echoes of self-doubt. "What if we pooled our ideas to reinforce the notion of our studio's vision?" The initial responses were mixed, some excited, some hesitant. Yet within their tentative interactions, Sarah discerned a shift, a collective yearning for a voice that resonated beyond corporate expectations. As she stood amidst her peers, a spark ignited in her gut, urging her to direct this growing fire. She envisioned their gathered creativity taking root as a bulwark against corporate encroachment. But the question lingered, weighing on her. Would this rebellion solidify their resolve or fracture it? The studio was at a crossroads, and so was she. As the day waned, she saw her potential allies drifting away, their resolve unspoken but palpable. What would she do next? A dangerous confrontation loomed closer than ever, one that would test not just her resolve but the fabric of her relationships within the studio. But what choice did she have now? She was standing at the edge of rebellion, teetering between hope and danger. The time had come to face the true battle for the soul of the studio and for her own artistic freedom. How far was she willing to go to protect it? Would she be the catalyst for change, or would she merely become another casualty of the corporate takeover? The next morning, Sarah awoke to a heavy fog blanketing her thoughts. The tension from the previous day clung to her like a winter chill, refusing to lift. A storm was brewing, not just within the corridors of the studio, but inside her too. The urgency for action wrestled with the fear of consequence. As she brewed her coffee, Sarah gazed out the window, steeling herself for the day. She had made a decision: it was time for a strategy meeting, a renegade gathering of like-minded artists. They had to share their visions and devise plans to protect their studio from corporate erosion. But in doing so, she had also opened a Pandora's box of uncertainty. The possible repercussions loomed large. Arriving at the studio, the vibrant energy felt dampened. Conversations drifted off as she entered, and creative minds that had once buzzed with inspiration now seemed subdued, tentative. The weight of Douglas's words still hung in the air, infecting the atmosphere with doubt. Mustering her resolve, Sarah gathered a small group of artists in the corner of the break room. Their expressions reflected a mix of fear and hope. She found herself at the center of this impromptu gathering. As their eyes turned toward her, she felt a shift within. The burden of their expectations ignited a determination burning deep inside her. "We need to be proactive," she urged, her voice rising above the low murmurs. "We can't just wait for corporate to decide our fate. Each of us has a unique vision and talent. Together, we can build a compelling case for who we are as a studio." Nods of agreement began to ripple through the group, emboldening her stance. Encouraged by their reactions, she pressed on. Let us brainstorm our projects, our ideas for the future. We need both a unifying vision and individual plans that showcase our strengths. If we collectively represent our art, our values, they will have to take note. The energy shifted, tentative enthusiasm blossomed as whispers of concepts flowed. One artist shared plans for an experimental exhibition, another spoke of collaborating across mediums. Each idea built upon the last, coalescing into a tapestry of aspiration. But lingering doubt sat beside every burst of excitement. What would Douglas say if he discovered their plan? Would Ms. Reynolds deem them insubordinate? Their dreams hung in the balance, a tightening grip around her heart. After the initial burst of creativity, a reality check swept through the room. But what if we get caught? One artist asked, anxiety rippling through the group. Their faces reflected trepidation. They were artists, not revolutionaries. Still, Sarah recognized a delicate line forming. This was not merely about rebellion, it was about self-preservation, about reclaiming their creative identity. The looming corporate takeover could suffocate them, and so digging their heels into the ground felt not just necessary, but vital. She found herself in a tug-of-war between ambition and caution. Was she leading them toward liberation or recklessness? Would the collaborative sparks of imagination fuel liberation, or ignite a swift response from corporate powers? An idea struck. What if we framed it as an informal workshop? Something within our creativity that could enhance our skills? We can build the confidence we need. The suggestion landed. There was potential to harness their artistic passions while cloaking them in safety. This could help alleviate individual fears, and Sarah felt momentum build under her feet. As the gathering broke apart, a newfound sense of purpose galvanized Sarah. She had stepped into a role she never anticipated, part leader, part conjurer of creativity. Yet as she mused over the day's plans, a simmering uneasiness started to coalesce in her mind. How long could they hide their activities? What if one of them faltered and reported her? Trust was fragile, and betrayal threatened to unravel everything. Yet resolve hardening in her chest pushed her forward. It was time to take risks, but could she truly stake her future on the fragile camaraderie of her peers? Would they stand together in the face of opposition, or would the corporate grip prove too powerful? With thoughts racing, her heart ached with uncertainty. She wasn't ready to lose everything she fought for, yet the stakes had never felt higher. The true test was yet to come, and she needed to be prepared for whatever storm awaited. As she glanced around the studio, the shadows of creativity danced along the walls like an omen. The time was drawing near for confrontation, and she sensed the ground beneath her shifting. What would she discover about herself when the confrontation finally came? As the days edged closer to the makeshift workshop Sarah envisioned, her apprehension transformed into an electric pulse. Each morning brought a renewed sense of purpose, amplified by whispered conversations that curled through the studio like smoke. Yet, with great purpose came equally great peril. Every interaction with her colleagues was laced with implications. The fear of exposure lingered in the corners of her psyche like a lurking predator. One afternoon, after a particularly productive session where ideas cascaded through her team, Sarah glanced at her watch. Obligations loomed, her clients expected deliverables, and an exhibition opening was mere days away. Balancing this newfound responsibility as a shadow leader weighed heavily upon her shoulders, yet she couldn't turn back now. Her vision was taking root, fragile, but vibrant. As she settled into her desk, the studio filled with gentle chaos. Artists mingled, canvases were splattered with paint, and laughter echoed against the walls, soundtracks of a creative sanctuary overcoming the shadows of corporate oversight. Sarah's heart swelled with a drumbeat of hope but echoed with the nagging thought that the clock was ticking. Halfway through her afternoon, a commotion erupted as Douglas stormed past her desk, clutching a neglected cell phone, Ms. Reynolds' phone, husbanding it as if it were a ticking bomb. His face mirrored the tightening grip of corporate anxiety that had enveloped the team since the takeover announcement. "Sarah," he called, stopping abruptly. "Can you grab that file for me?" I left it in the conference room. Sure, she replied, already on her feet. As she walked toward the conference space, her mind oscillated between the planned workshop and the swirling anxiety from Douglas's demeanor. Perhaps it wasn't just the corporate tension affecting him, perhaps he sensed her brewing storm. In the conference room, she spotted the file spread across the stark table, its contents spilled like confessions. But as she bent to retrieve it, her gaze caught the phone resting beside it. Ms. Reynolds' screen flickered with the incoming call from a number she didn't recognize. Part of her resisted the temptation. Confrontation with authority felt like an invitation to disaster. But curiosity tangled tightly with her intuition. Was this a sign of imminent escalation? Before she could think twice, instinct propelled her forward. She seized the phone, hesitated, and then pressed the green button. Hello? Is this Ms. Reynolds? A sharp voice inquired. No, this is Sarah, she replied, enthusiasm draining from her voice instantly. I need to speak with her about the upcoming restructuring. It's urgent, the voice responded, the undercurrent of impatience rising. Her heart raced as she realized this could be the moment of truth, the confirmation of their darkest fears. I can take a message, she offered, internal alarms ringing, urging her to hang up. Tell her the concerns from the board are escalating, the caller continued, a chilling calm edging into the urgency. There are forces at play that will affect all departments if she doesn't act fast. We can't lose the studio's potential. A depth of anxiety clawed at Sarah's gut. This wasn't about restructuring, it was about survival. The threat to her creative home was immediate and tangible. Without thinking, she blurted, I can relay the urgency. We intend to stay true to our vision. Silence lingered for a moment, and then an unsettling chuckle echoed through the line. Be careful, Miss Sarah. The market favors those who play it safe. Your delusions of grandeur may lead you somewhere you don't want to end up. The call ended abruptly, leaving her heart pounding wildly in her chest, reality shifting underneath her. She had just navigated into murky waters, tantalizing prospects intertwining with haunting threats. What had she unwittingly invited with her words? When Sarah finally returned to her desk, she felt a heavy cocktail of confidence and fear bubbling inside her. That small act, speaking out of turn, had unveiled not just a threat but her latent ability to influence an unintended engagement with the corporate scheming she had been so wary of. Yet, as she clutched Ms. Reynolds' phone, a question crept into her thoughts. What had the caller meant by forces at play? How woefully unprepared she felt for whatever storm was now swirling around her. The game had shifted drastically, confrontations loomed closer than ever. Every instinct urged her to draw back, pick her battles wisely, avoid the fray. But another voice echoed louder, this could be her moment to seize control. The precarious balance between ambition and caution hung like a thread before her. Would she embrace the responsibility that accompanied her emerging leadership, or retreat back into the shadows and let fate decide her course? Faced with this new realization, Sarah felt the ground shift again. She was no longer simply a participant, she was a player. But as momentum built within her, one question blatantly pierced her resolve: how deep into this game was she willing to go? The next confrontation was imminent, a game she never anticipated playing had begun. Would she discover the strength to lead, or would the emerging storm swallow her whole? The following morning dawned like an echo of uncertainty. The studio buzzed with energy, yet Sarah felt enveloped in a bubble of isolation. The conversations around her morphed into muffled whispers, fragments of laughter and camaraderie that she struggled to penetrate. It was as if every brushstroke, every word, now carried the weight of potential betrayal. Eyes darted her way occasionally, and she could feel Douglas's scrutiny as he dissected her decisions. Moments turned into hours, and with each ticking second, anxiety clawed at her resolve. Today felt different, the air crackled not just with creativity, but with the remnants of her impulsive phone call. Every glance over her shoulder might reveal some consequence she'd yet to understand. Could her audacity prove a catalyst for disaster? As she settled in front of her easel, a spark of determination surged from within. This workshop would not merely be a collective pursuit of artistic expression, it would reframe the narrative of the studio's identity against the corporate spin tightening its grip. She envisioned a space where creativity danced with defiance, a sanctuary amid the corporate fog. Gradually, sketches adorned her canvas, fueled by her newfound ambition. Ideas flowed, and she barked out directives exhilarating yet terrifying. A rare confidence emerged, shaping itself into a weapon she hadn't realized she possessed. The team seemed to respond, their enthusiasm igniting alongside her vision. It felt right, exhilarating even, but underneath that excitement, fear lingered like an unwanted shadow. Halfway through the morning, she cornered Douglas in a conversation, gauging the currents of tension woven into their workspace. "Do you think we should address the restructuring theme with Ms. Reynolds?" she ventured, carefully choosing her words. His expression hardened, the crease upon his brow deepening. "I'm not sure that's wise, Sarah. There are things we don't know, alliances forming in silence. This might backfire." Her pulse quickened not from fear but from an uncanny sense of purpose creeping past her hesitation. What if it doesn't? What if we position ourselves as a driving force instead? Douglas studied her with narrowed eyes, an unspoken challenge hanging thick in the air. It was a silent negotiation she dared to navigate. Could her tenacity coax him into her orbit? "Look, confronting the board won't be easy. They're ruthless," he finally replied, formulaic in his caution. But the hint of respect glimmered in his gaze. "If we're in this together, we need a solid plan." A spark ignited within her. "Then let us start there. A workshop focusing on resilience. Let us redefine our mission. We have the power over our narrative." He hesitated, processing, but she could see the walls beginning to crack as the thought took hold. As they mapped out the workshop, birthing a collaborative vision, her spirit soared. They were no longer merely reacting, they were engineering their fate. Moments of laughter punctuated their discussions, and for the first time in days, Sarah felt the weight lifting. Yet, a dark cloud loomed just outside her consciousness, reminding her of the phone call's chilling resonance. With newfound fire coursing through her veins, she gathered the team, sharing ideas as excitement rippled through the room. For each voice that emerged, every suggestion, her confidence grew. This was more than leadership, this was reclamation. The looming confrontation with Ms. Reynolds could either be their undoing or their defining moment. Yet a knot tightened in her stomach as she contemplated the upcoming board meeting. The forces at play whispered taunts that tainted her elation. The stakes escalated in ways she couldn't yet grasp, and doubts permeated her burgeoning resolve. When the day concluded and the echoes of the studio quieted, Sarah gazed out at the city beyond the studio's windows. Each light was a challenge, each flicker a reminder of her journey so far. Tomorrow, following the workshop, they would be on the cusp of their bold confrontation with Ms. Reynolds. Would they emerge together as pioneers or disband under the weight of corporate greed? The tension felt palatable, awakening a hunger for the inevitable clash looming before her. As her heart raced, one piercing thought cut through the chaos: she had traded safety for ambition, and there would be no turning back now. What awaited her on the other side of conflict? The morning arrived with the promise of clarity, yet the shadows from the previous day clung stubbornly to Sarah's determination. The studio hummed with activity as preparations for the workshop reached a fever pitch. She delivered instructions with an energy that felt electric, her voice resonating with an authority she'd never fully embraced before. Yet beneath her assertive exterior, an undercurrent of apprehension twisted through her thoughts, a reminder of the confrontation that loomed just beyond the horizon. During a brief moment of solitude, Sarah observed her team. They were engaged, brimming with ideas she had once feared would be dismissed or ridiculed. She marveled at how her impulsive decision, the risky phone call, had galvanized them, igniting a sense of purpose that had been dormant for far too long. But doubt remained, a quiet whisper urging her to reconsider the ramifications of her audacity. Was she leading them toward a reckoning or a reckless endeavor? As she charted the workshop's agenda, she focused intently on fostering an environment that encouraged exploration and resilience. Let us create spaces for each voice, she encouraged, her confidence pooling into a well of optimism. This workshop is not just about our art, it's about reclaiming our narratives. The room buzzed with agreement, yet her mind spiraled into darker thoughts. Was this not just about artistry but about personal and professional survival? Later, when Douglas approached her, the intensity of his expression caught her off guard. We need to talk about Ms. Reynolds and how we present ourselves. The board is sharp. They won't just sit back and watch us claim our space. His tone was serious, and Sarah felt the weight of his caution. Exactly, she shot back, we're not just claiming space, we're redefining the terms of engagement. This isn't about playing nice anymore. Her words were laced with a fierceness she hadn't tapped into before. The conviction in her voice startled her, as if it belonged to another version of herself. Yet, even as she argued passionately for their autonomy, an inner voice cautioned her there were risks in challenging authority. This wasn't some idealistic movement, it was navigating a corporate labyrinth filled with hidden threats and fragile alliances. In the afternoon, her resolve solidified as she reiterated her vision to the group. They designed visual themes that represented resilience against a backdrop of corporate conformity. Each idea sparked debates filled with enthusiasm and potential. The workshop pool was shaping up to be a wellspring of innovation, but the words of Douglas lingered like a specter, reminding her that the stakes were higher than any creative endeavor could encompass. Once the day's tasks wound down, Sarah stole a moment to gather her thoughts. Murmurs of the team planning future steps filled her ears, yet her mind drifted to the darker implications of their confrontation. Could she bear the weight of their expectations should the board decide to crush their newfound dynamism? In that moment of reflection, she felt a nudge of intuition, that twitch of foresight urging her to dig deeper into her own motivations. What did she truly seek through this workshop? Recognition? Security? Empowerment? Or was it a desire to break the mold that had quietly suffocated her spirit for years? The air in the studio shifted, and she turned toward the window, captivated by the skyline that sparkled under the waning light of day. In that reflection, she sensed another layer of her identity emerging, a relentless pursuit of authenticity. Tomorrow held the potential for both triumph and catastrophe, and as she exhaled slowly, she accepted the reality of her dual existence. With mounting seriousness, she understood that the confrontation with Ms. Reynolds wasn't merely about defending their creative rights, it was about standing up for her own agency and that of her team. No longer could she afford to play the passive role, she was ready to take charge of her destiny. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she felt a swell of anticipation mixed with dread. Tomorrow would draw out the truth buried beneath their corporate facade. Would courage lead them to victory or leave them stranded in corporate chaos? And just like that, a chilling thought gripped her. What if an unexpected turn of events shone light on a hidden agenda within the boardroom that threatened everything she had fought for? Sarah stood before the studio window, the world outside blurring into a haze of color as evening draped its cloak over the city. She had always been one to plan meticulously, to anticipate outcomes before they unfolded. Yet now, she felt a stirring within her, a growing acknowledgement that plans might not be enough. The next day would demand more than strategies, it would require a fundamental shift in how she viewed authority and her place within it. After what seemed like endless moments lost in her thoughts, she decided to confront the echo of apprehension thrumming in her chest. If she were to engage effectively with the board, she needed to anchor her intentions. What did she believe they feared? What was at stake for each member behind those polished tables? The idea of stepping into the boardroom for the first time gripped her with anxiety, but also unexpectedly a sense of empowerment. The retreat of daylight transformed the studio, casting elongated shadows that danced across her path as she gathered her materials for the following day's workshop. Each poster, concept drawing, and brochure was a symbol of their fledgling aspirations. They represented a collective defiance of norms, hers as much as her team's. As she stacked the materials, their vibrancy seemed to mock the dullness of corporate expectations. Sarah's phone buzzed, interrupting her reverie. It was a message from Douglas, a practical reminder about their meeting with Ms. Reynolds. His ongoing caution felt suffocating, like a weighted blanket pressing down on her creativity. What if she just let it all go? Let go of the fear and the need for approval. What if the team's collective voice became a catalyst instead of a target for institutional critique? As she considered this, clarity washed over her. She understood that their workshop was not merely a creative response to corporate dictates but a necessary assertion of their identities. The thought ignited something deep within. Each rejection she faced or silence she endured held purpose now. It was time not only to reclaim her narrative but to craft it into something indomitable. That night, sleep eluded her as myriad plans crossed her mind. She envisioned confronting Ms. Reynolds, not as an opponent, but as someone deeply invested in the very organization they were trying to invigorate. How could she appeal to the board's senses of progress and innovation? Moments of inspiration shot through her like lightning. This was a chance not just to advocate for her team, but to reveal the value they could bring, potentially enriching the entire company. Determined, she rose early, her heart racing with anxiety and anticipation. The workshops, the concepts, they all felt like seeds meant to be planted and nurtured rather than merely presented. She calculated each step, her mind reverberating with an authority she was beginning to claim, her heart pounding with a rhythm that matched the pulse of possibility. Arriving at the studio, she noticed her team was already there, their energy infectious and their excitement palpable. They huddled in groups, engrossed in discussions about last-minute adjustments. Sarah felt a wave of pride and gratitude wash over her, bonding her to them. This was their moment, and she could feel the collective heartbeat of ambition in the air. As the hours ticked down towards the meeting, Sarah's internal mantra shifted with each breath. She was not just a participant, she was a player in this unfolding narrative. The workshop was their declaration, and she needed to harness that collective spirit to champion their cause. But beneath her newly discovered resolve lay a stirring unease, a whisper of doubt lurking in the corners as the clock edged closer to 9. Was she truly ready for the confrontation? The question echoed louder, demanding an answer. As they prepared for the meeting, a sudden call interrupted the fervor of preparation. With a glance, Sarah noted the name on the screen, a sharp lurch of recognition coursing through her. It was Ms. Reynolds. The instinct to answer felt primal. Perhaps this was not just a coincidence but an opportunity. Would she risk everything and dive headfirst into what could be a trap, or summon the courage to take this unexpected call? The decision lingered, electric with potential, a momentary pause hanging in the air as she weighed the ramifications of her choice. Would she dare answer and reveal secrets that could turn the tide of their struggle, or would caution dictate her next move? The phone vibrated insistently in her hand, and Sarah felt as though the weight of the moment pressed down on her like a heavy fog. Doubts cascaded through her mind. Answering could expose vulnerabilities she wasn't prepared to confront, yet it also held the promise of connection, a way to bridge the chasm that lay between her aspirations and the corporate structure that felt more like a wall than a support system. As the ringtone faded, the silence in the studio grew thick, her team unaware of the internal battle raging inside her. Could this call shift the trajectory of everything they were attempting to achieve? Without fully processing her decision, she swiped to answer, her pulse quickening in response to the voice on the other end. Sarah? Ms. Reynolds' voice was crisp and authoritative, tinged with unexpected warmth. I'm glad I reached you. I want to discuss the workshop today. A flood of adrenaline washed over Sarah, blurring her thoughts momentarily. Of course. I'm excited about it. It was a calculated answer, but deep inside, her heart raced with uncertainty. She sensed that this conversation was not just about the workshop, it was the precursor to something much larger. I've been reviewing your materials, and I must say, I'm impressed. Ms. Reynolds' tone shifted slightly. Sarah caught a hint of intrigue. But I have reservations about the direction you're taking. The board may not see it the way you do, and I want to prepare you. Sarah clenched her jaw at the implication. They worked so hard, infusing every aspect of the workshop with meaning and purpose. What do you mean? She pressed, a thread of defiance threading through her voice. There are expectations that have to be managed. The board likes safe ideas packaged in familiar frameworks. If you want them to engage, you have to meet them where they are, not just where you wish they would be. Her instincts flared, sparking a sense of righteous indignation. Was this the game everyone had warned her about, the need to restrict creativity in service of corporate preservation? But if we simply conform, how do we claim our space in this organization? Change doesn't happen by following the status quo. There was a pause on the line, an opportunity for Ms. Reynolds to recoil, yet to Sarah's surprise, she pressed on. You're right. But think of it this way: how far can creativity travel if it's tethered to a less than resilient ship? I believe there's a way to navigate this, maintaining your vision while also positioning yourself as an ally to the board. Zing. Her thoughts scrambled. Ms. Reynolds wasn't merely dismissing her ideals, she was offering a partnership, albeit one laced with conditions. It flipped Sarah's expectations upside down and forced her to reconsider every interaction that lay ahead. It was a potential path forward, one where her voice and ambition could fuse with organizational realities. Let us find a way, Sarah replied, her voice steadier now, fueled by a mix of ambition and warfare strategy. But I need to believe that the board can appreciate transformational ideas. We have the potential to shift mindsets, not just deliver presentations. Therein lies your challenge, Ms. Reynolds stated, her tone less robotic, hinting at vulnerability. Lead the narrative today, Sarah. Make them see what you see. Show them that embracing disruption leads to growth. As the call ended, Sarah felt a rush of empowerment, a revelation devoid of fear and infused with duty. They were not mere participants in the corporate machine, they were agents of change, tasked with awakening a stagnant ethos. Her pulse surged with possibility, and just as quickly, the sense of pressure pressed back, reminding her that today's success could hinge on every word she chose. Her team turned toward her as she hung up, anticipation buzzing in the air. They were ready, armed with hope and creativity, yet a specter of doubt loomed. Everything okay? Douglas asked, scanning her face for clues. It's time we show them how powerful our ideas are, she declared, summoning conviction from the depths of her uncertainties. Let us do this. As they gathered for their final huddle, Sarah felt the stakes rise. Would their boldness spark a real conversation, or would they merely incite resistance? She knew that no matter the outcome, this pivotal moment would demand everything she had. The clock ticked toward 9, each second drawing them closer to their fate. Would they begin to carve their own path, or would today's confrontation signify another failure? Her thoughts aligned in a singular focus: this was now or never, and she would not retreat. As the clock struck 9, the studio fell into an expectant hush. Sarah stood at the forefront, surrounded by her team artists transformed into defenders of their shared dreams. The workshop they had meticulously crafted was more than just a collection of presentations, it was a manifestation of their collective desire for authenticity and recognition within an industry overshadowed by corporate bureaucracy. Her heart raced as she cast a resolute glance around the room. Each familiar face resonated with the energy of unexpressed potential, and she could feel their ambition simmering just beneath the surface. They hadn't come this far to cower before authority, they had gathered to reclaim their narratives, to assert their value in a world that often relegated them to the periphery. Okay, everyone, let us show them who we are. She urged, her voice steady and imbued with an authority that resonated within the hearts of her colleagues. As they entered the conference room, Sarah felt a wave of fear wash over her momentarily, but it was swiftly eclipsed by her growing confidence. She had spent sleepless nights envisioning this moment, strategizing how to turn their creativity into a compelling argument. Then, as the board members settled in, she recalled Ms. Reynolds' words, urging her to steer the narrative. "Today, we embody transformation," Sarah began, her voice unwavering, "not just art but a movement of innovation. We stand not only for ourselves but for the vision of this studio as a beacon in the artistic landscape." The presentation unfolded in a cacophony of vibrant colors and daring concepts, each slide sparking energy in the room. Sarah navigated her team's ideas seamlessly, demonstrating how their creativity could elevate the studio rather than bind it. She illustrated potential collaborations, showcasing each artist's individual talent while reminding the board of the studio's unique identity, its heart and soul. And then came a pivotal moment, when the stark faces of the board shifted. Eyes that had once narrowed in skepticism now widened with intrigue. Conversations that had felt lost in the void of hierarchy began to pulse with possibility. This was what she had envisioned: an opening, a connection. "Imagine," Sarah urged, "if we harness this energy not just as artists but as pioneers, adapting yet preserving our essence. Together, we can forge a future that honors the past while embracing innovation." The tension in the room morphed into a chorus of questions. Her colleagues chimed in, strengthening the narrative she had constructed. Support surged from every corner, it felt as if walls were crumbling. Just then, Douglas' hand shot up, initiating a dialogue about metrics that demonstrated how creative risk-taking could lead to tangible corporate success. Sarah exchanged a triumphant glance with him. They were now allies, actively reshaping the trajectory of their studio. Hours evaporated in this compelling dance of ideas and feedback. As the meeting reached its crescendo, a palpable shift set in. The board started to engage, not as distant overseers but as potential partners in this extraordinary journey. "We appreciate your passion and insight," one of the board members acknowledged. "Let us discuss these projects further. Our goals align more than we initially presumed." The victory stung sweetly, igniting flames of hope and possibility. Sarah inhaled deeply, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Today became a pivotal milestone, not merely a successful presentation, but a declaration of autonomy, courage, and resilience. As the team exited the boardroom, Sarah took a moment to absorb the reality of her transformation, the metamorphosis from an overlooked assistant to a decisive leader. She had demonstrated that their voices mattered, that their identity was worth fighting for. What had once been a fearful flicker of ambition now burned brightly with purpose. The journey had not only altered the studio's narrative but forged bonds between her colleagues. They were no longer merely co-workers, they were champions of change, united in their vision for the studio. As Sarah stepped outside into the warm sunlight, a satisfied smile graced her lips. The quiet chaos of creativity surged around her. The studio felt alive. She held her head high, not just as an employee but as an artist, a leader, an advocate for a vibrant future. "There's no turning back now," she whispered to herself, aware that they were on the precipice of genuine artistry and authentic expression. The overwhelming sense of accomplishment coursed through her veins, invigorating her spirit. This was not merely an end, it was a beginning. How far might they soar from this newfound freedom? For the first time, Sarah's truth resonated with clarity: they were creators, destined to overcome. So, what will you do with your own narrative? How will you harness your voice to reshape your own reality? You need to subscribe now to embark on this journey with us. This is the moment to show your support for stories of transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread the message that creativity can triumph over fear. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how courage and creativity can forge a brighter path.